it's so gospel that I gotta shake my tambourine a little bit. That church gospel, that's some fun stuff. You know what I mean? You know how fun a church is by how much potato salad's in the fridge. If they ain't coming with the potato salad, with just crackers, wafers, and wine, go find you a better church. Church is meant to be about fellowship, fun, community, and if it's about dogma, religion, and piosity, piss off. You know what I mean? It should be about pushing your baby strollers into somebody else's baby stroller, kicking some kids onto a blanket, barbecuing, potato salad. You know what I mean? Tambourines, potato salad, that's it. That's the measure. If you ain't got tambourines, you ain't got potato salad, that ain't worth your time. Go find somebody else that's having fun. We're doing our saxophone series, of course, today. Number 40, Willis Jackson. Willis Jackson to me is the body of the soul jazz movement. You know, there's a lot of other great cats doing it. Gene Ammons, of course, but Jack McDuff. But for me, Willis Jackson, it's just his wheelhouse. He's a Florida guy, if I remember. Yeah, he's from Miami, born April 25th, 1932, smack in the middle of the Depression. Florida is a very different place than the 30s. I believe there's one railway line going down to Miami, some resorts there for the East Coast crowd to go vacation. The rest of the state's gators and mosquitoes. You know, it wasn't developed very much early on. It came much later, Florida's development. And it's Florida, especially down in the Panhandle, not the Panhandle, on the peninsula, it's different than the rest of the South. In part because you got so many snowbirds camping down there every year. But it's just there's a big Cuban, Caribbean influence. There's such a diversity in southern Florida nowadays that the mentalities of even northern Florida, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, it's two different worlds. But in those days, to be from Miami, you were it for the state. You know, it was the cultural hub of what was pretty much just being settled in a lot of ways in Florida. Very different than it, like Arizona, Nevada, those places, and they had a water issue. Florida's got a muggy issue. You need air conditioning to live in Florida on the good, you know. Willis plays with Cootie Williams. And Cootie Williams, of course, had a great band. I believe some of it was even during his time with Ellington. Cootie's one of the great trumpet players of the early jungle band Ellington era, you know, along with Tricky Sam Nanton, that era where they were just doing some real fun hooting and hollering with the mutes and the horns. And Ellington gave his guys a lot of rein to really have fun with the band. And Cootie's a fantastic player, but he has his own band off and on from 48 to 55. And Willis Jackson is an off and on member of that group. He tours the South and gets to know a lot of the juke joints. He ends up coming north. He marries a gal by the name of Ruth Brown, who was kind of a soul blues singer at Atlantic. And she has one record that's more jazzy on the 1200 series that's actually really good. I like that record quite a lot. They end up getting married, Willis Jackson and Ruth Brown. She's just soul bucket blues, and he's the perfect compatriot for that. Coming from Cootie Williams and the circuit in the South, when the soul movement starts to really take root, he was a natural fit. Prestige signs him in 1959. And boy, does he make a string of records for Prestige. We're listening to right now 7232 Thunderbird, and that was one of his nicknames, Thunderbird. And that tells you a lot about this brother. Look at that face. We talked about the three brushstrokes: environment, experience within that environment, personality. He comes from southern Florida. He's played with funk cats like Cootie Williams. He's married to a soul singer who's having some success at Atlantic. He's probably not super stressed about the money. He wasn't born in Alabama, you know. He's a more positive, look at him. Tell me you wouldn't want to shake a tambourine with Thunderbird. Yes, the potato salad right here, Willis. Clean that up. You gotta love personality. Because personality, especially in an art form, that's entire function is to emote and improvise based on how I feel. Like, I can't believe how many people seem to miss that point. Oh no, it's about musicianship. No! It's an art form based on improvising and emoting how you feel. And when the music gets away from feeling and goes into thought and goes away from the blues, it's hard not to say it's still good, but it's something different. And some people get so bristled about that, like, oh, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you feeling? What are you hearing when you listen? And again, the blues is about having a good time, so we don't have the blues. I gotta keep driving that home. And if you want to know the difference between the blues and the not blues, especially on the saxophone, a really easy way to know. Am I hearing a blues guts player? Is he telling me a story? That's a story happening. Something that's got cacophony and voices talking over each other, while start, stop, staccato on you. That's not a narrator. A fellow brought up an interesting comment yesterday in my episode on the 4 engines of art. He was talking about the modern art movement in America and how there was a right conservative acceptance of that movement, in part because there was no humanity to it. There was no empathy or cause you could attach to a Sidney Pollack. It was just this bizarre art form, color, shapes. It doesn't have a message to it. And so the power structure of conservative wealth ideology was like, that's okay, we don't mind that kind of art. You hang that in your house. It's very prestigious, darling. Sharpen your moustache. Because it had no connection to emotional feeling. And so I swear to God, when you have music that's rooted in jazz, but gets away from the blues and storytelling and gets into ideological, ego-driven, sophisticated, intellectual, we're splashing paint on the wall, ain't no one got to worry about that, because there ain't no empathy to be done. You hear a brother talking to a saxophone hour upon hour, telling you a story, it can't help but make you feel something. Willis has a long series of records here at Prestige, and they're really outstanding. I'm going to try to show you the 7200 stuff first. 7296, this is the good life. See what I'm saying? This is the good life. With Frank Robinson, Pat Azara, Carl Wilson, John Hadrick, soul players that we don't really know too much about. Willis Jackson, Grease and Gravy. Pretty much the same group there as well. This is number 7285. 1961, 62 probably. 72, 73, Willis Jackson. Loose. What you supposed to be talking about? Ain't his mouthpiece that loose? No, sir. It's the guy with the potato salad. There's some juice in that berry. See what I'm saying? Neapolitan Nights, or as they would say in New Jersey, Napolitan. Being of Naples, Napolitan. This is Arrivederci Roma, Volare, Verdi Svonce. He's kind of doing a bit of an Italian shtick on that somewhat. This Willis Jackson Bossa Nova record used to be everywhere. This is great stuff. You know, I love this record. To me, a guy like Willis effortlessly can emote something like the Bossa Nova. Because we used to picnic baskets, blankets, and potato salad. So all we gotta do now is switch to cocktails, blankets, and a good time. Ain't that far apart. Some of his earliest work here. I meant to put these in order, but I forgot. 71, 72, Willis Jackson. Keep on blowing. You do that, honey. Please, Mr. Jackson. Willis Jackson, 71, 62. Every one of these records is a fun exercise in the blues, storytelling, guts, grease, and gravy. Really grooving. Willis Jackson, 71, 96. I always like that cover a lot. That just screams to me 1960. Everything about it makes me want to pick up my National Geographic from my bathroom as a kid. Blue Gator. Another one of his nicknames was Blue Gator. 71, 83 with Jack McDuff. And McDuff's a guy he records with a lot over the years. Willis Jackson, 73-29, shouting. Some stuff with McDuff here. Together again. Willis Jackson, tell it. 71-42. He's got a couple records on Verve, 87, 82, 85, 89. And if I recall, these are actually the same record reissued. This record's Smoking with Willis Jackson. This is on the Argo Cadet label. It's actually Cadet 763. So that means Argo's probably gone by that point, making it pretty much just a cadet thing at that point. But Willis Jackson, he's fun. You know, he's sprightly, full of life, the joy of living. And I think that's something that we lose at times. Oh yeah. The blues ain't about having the blues. The blues is about, let's not talk about that shit right now. And I can tell you firsthand, there was times where I'd be having some kind of philosophical conversation DJing for a black room. You know, a couple guys would be up there chatting with me. And me and one cat might be starting to dig into some stuff. My boy Christian, we could talk about some philosophy and some history and some racial issues. And most of the other cats would walk away. They're like, I don't want to talk about this shit right now. You know what I mean? It's not why I'm here. I want to have a good time. Chase me some cottontail. Did I show you all these McDuff records together again? Swivel Hips. Cookin' Sherry. This is one of his first ones, early. And then Willis Jackson, Live Action. So the brother makes a lot of records on Prestige. And that one on Verve, that one on Cadet. But to me, it's this Prestige body of work that is just fun, wheelhouse, party, good time. The club's opening up, people are coming in, having their first sip of the booze. Willis Jackson's gonna be there to greet them. You know what I mean? I use Willis Jackson a lot in my gigs. He's perfect 8:30 to 8:15, 8:45. Oh, see what I'm saying? It's comforting, welcoming, embracing. It's a good time. And I'm all about that good time vehicle. Moving on. Jimmy Heath, number 39. One of the great Heath brothers. Al Tootie Heath, younger brother, drummer. And then the older brother was a bass player, Percy Heath. And the Heath brothers have quite a history in jazz. Philadelphia natives. They're interwoven through the fabric of a lot of what happens 50s and the 60s. Pretty omnipresent guys. Jimmy, great sax player, plays alto and I think he switched to tenor at one point. He's too skinny for war. Jimmy Heath's a little guy. Jimmy Heath's a tender bone. See what I'm saying? And a whole lot of meat to pick on a tender bone. These are his Riverside records, and all 6 of these are belonging in people's collections. The sidemen are top and marked. He's an expressive cat that comes right from the black experience and speaks from the soul, from the cuff. Very expressive. He's got some modernity in him. Elements of bop, elements of hard bop, but he always stays, never too far from the blues. You know, born October 25th, 1926. His nickname was Little Bird. He listened to a lot of Parker as a young kid. Like I said, he was too skinny for the war. They turned him away because he was just too frail. You know how frail and skinny a brother's got to be to not get drafted in 1942, I think it was? That's insane. The brother must have ate 2 weeks before draft meeting. He's like, I ain't gonna eat a thing. I ain't doing that shit. And they take a brother, you know what I'm saying? Well, that life street was short worth. As Mos Def always used to say, black life is treated with short worth. And for them to turn away a young black kid, kudos to that Army recruiter saying, you know what, young man, stick with your saxophone because you probably can't even handle these rifles. Do your thing, boy. He plays with Howard McGee earlier on, who I'm a big fan of. He plays with Dizzy 1947, switches to the tenor. While he's still in Philadelphia in 1946 after the war, he has his own band, and John Coltrane, Benny Golson, Specs Wright, Johnny Coles, Ray Bryant are all members of this group at a time. You know, and that Philadelphia scene, which Coltrane was a part of there, it was a booming scene, probably next only to Detroit, Chicago, and New York in terms of its output of great musicians and its pipeline to the scene. And Philly has the benefit over Detroit and Chicago because Philly's only a couple hours away from New York. So you could make an evening engagement if you had to, you know. And it's pretty universal that jazz players are always going to make that move to New York eventually. And they all pretty much have to, you know. It's where the big leagues are. And you can only go so far in your career being the biggest fish in Cleveland. We did an episode couple episodes ago about, was it Walter Benton? No, it wasn't Benton. Who was it? Joe Alexander, maybe? Some guy that was from Cleveland and was just unknown because he was well known there, but it wasn't part of the scene because he stayed home. Jimmy does prison twice for heroin. So as frail as he wasn't too frail to spend some time in jail. In 59 he gets out and manages to stay clean, cold, sober. His second term was like 6 years. It's a long time to spend in the can. In 59 he plays with Miles briefly. Didn't stick. And then he's the father of James Mtume, who does that great song Juicy Fruit, the great R&B band Mtume from the late 70s, early 80s. Biggie Smalls samples Juicy Fruit, and everyone will know that melody when they hear it. He's the father of Mtume. I didn't know that. He plays with Nat Adderley quite a lot, Art Blakey some, Blue Mitchell, Sam Jones. He's on a lot of their records, Sam Jones' albums on Riverside. Jimmy volunteers on a few of Blue Mitchell's Riversides. And Riverside Records, like Blue Note, you know, these guys would work on each other's albums quite often to help cross-promote each other, and because they loved each other, you know. This wasn't a music about competitiveness and shit-talking as much as it was support and integrated within the black community. There's no jazz form that's quite like it. No music form, you know. The way jazz cats work together, and a long time to be in a group is a year and a half. You know, it's not like rock bands where this is my band, this is who I'm going to work with the next 25 years. I'm going to keep moving on, finding greener pastures, finding new inspiration, bigger audience. It's pretty transitional always, but they're never about to not turn back and work with an old friend. It's very wonderful that way. I love all of his Riverside records. Great lineups, great sidemen. Julius Watkins is on this. Freddie Hubbard's on this. Jimmy Heath, Percy Heath, Albert Heath, and Cedar Walton. I forgot all three of the Heath brothers were on this record. It's awesome. Recorded in 1961. It's great how the black family is such an institution in black music. And I learned this first in R&B. But when you look at all the great soul funk bands, they're almost all anchored by a set of brothers. And I ain't talking like two. I'm talking like 6 brothers from the same bloodline start a group. You know, one of the great examples of that is the band Zapp. Roger Troutman and the Troutman brothers. Like there's like 6 Troutman brothers in Zapp, and the band has sad endings. Roger takes too much of the loot. One or two of his brothers ends up shooting and killing him, and then killing himself, if I recall. But we all know Roger Troutman from all those Tupac remixes with the vocal effect, California Love. That's Roger Troutman. You know, Troutman's one of the masters of funk, and the Roger Troutman songs of like I Can Make You Dance, More Bounce to the Ounce, Heartbreaker. Those are some of the best dance floor songs if you got the right crowd and the music's loud. Because like James Brown, it's so minimal in its construct that it needs volume to kind of fill in the gaps in the spaces. And you turn up Zapp, a Heartbreaker loud, the place is gonna fall out. But you need the right crowd. You need to have people who know something about that music. If you've never heard I Can Make You Dance or More Bounce to the Ounce, even if you've never heard it, you're gonna probably shake a bone to it. But if that was your shit in high school, you're gonna go a little nuts when you hear me play that. But yeah, it's pretty common for a lot of black artists to be in a group with their brothers. You know, and it obviously carries over into jazz completely. You know, and by carry over, it starts in jazz. You know, it moves into R&B. Number 38 on my list, Sonny Red. And Sonny Red has this great record on Blue Note with Sam Jones, Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, Roy Brooks, and Jimmy Cobb. This is a great record. Love it. Recorded probably 57. No, probably like 59, 58. But this is awesome. This is really an outstanding Blue Note. And a great example of the Blue Note sound. Sonny Red out of the blue. Sonny was born Sylvester Kynes Jr. That's a fun name. And might have been even more memorable than Sonny Red. Sylvester Kiner? I probably have to stick with that. December 17, 1932 in Detroit. Although he's not really considered part of the Detroit scene quite the same way as most of the Detroit cats are. Maybe because he's a little bit... No, he's probably the same age even. He does play with Donald Byrd. He does play with Curtis Fuller, Gigi Grace, Blue Mitchell, Wynton Kelly, Art Blakey. While in Detroit, he's playing with Barry Harris. And Harris and him are kind of a little separate from the Byrd, Jones Brothers scene. You know what I mean? It's a little bit Tommy Flanagan, you know, Paul Chambers. They're over here. And then you got Barry Harris and Sonny Red doing their thing. And Harris, of course, is one of the great instructional piano players of all time. Ends up teaching in New York for decades. He plays with Blakey in 54 on one of his early recordings. In 57, he plays on 3 of Curtis Fuller records that are really solid records. He plays with Art Pepper on a record called Two Altos. I think I do have that here. This is a Japanese reissue of it. I think it's on Regent, which is, of course, Savoy essentially by this point. I think, if I recall, it's one side of each. They're not playing together. So that would make these tracks from the 10-inch maybe even earlier. No, it's probably the 10-inch, probably 54, something like that. Yeah, I think that's what one's from. He does 4 LPs with Donald Byrd in 67, Mustang, Blackjack, Slow Drag, and The Creeper. I like all 4 of those records a lot. You know, in part because of how they're presented in total, not just because Sonny Red's there. They're just really good, blues-driven, kind of post, rump roller, Lee Morgan. It's not quite just boogaloo. It's back more time to just the basic blues, soul jazz. But with Donald Byrd and Sonny Red, there's some fire in it. You know, Sonny's a great player, and he plays with all the greats of the era. And he makes 3 really cool records at Riverside. Sonny Red with Yusef Lateef, Blue Mitchell, Barry Harris. Jazzland number 32. This is the Mode, Jazz Blend number 59 with Grant Green and Barry Harris. And then this one is with Blue Mitchell and Grant Green again, Images, one of the weirdest album covers in jazz. It looks like a dead bat to me that got flattened by a ram roller, but I don't really know what it is. It's probably just some abstract piece of art. The things that people can call art to me sometimes astound me. Number 37, another, and I'm going to say this now. We're getting to the zone now where I'm going to love most of the guys we're going to talk about. And I love most of the guys we've already talked about. A lot of it's just how well do I know you? You know, how much time we spent kicking it. That will determine how much I love a guy. You listen to any jazz player in love, you'll find things about them you love. You know? And that's one of the things about the avant-garde people don't realize. I like the avant-garde more than I let on. It's just too many people feel like they have to like it. And I want people to feel like that music is something if I want to get into, I can. I don't have to love it to be a jazz lover. It's optional. I don't have to like Imperial Stout to love beer. I can be a Pilsner drinker and be okay with that. And I feel like a lot of jazz fans are so pushing this extreme slice of the music and driving people away from the music. And I'm trying to be a voice against that. So if I gotta suppress the avant-garde some to elevate the rest of the art form, I'm fine with that. You know? And I still am not listening to it like I used to. So it's doubly edged. But Frank West, born on January 4th, 1923. Kansas City guy. We don't get a lot of guys from Kansas City. For as important a jazz town as Kansas City was in the 20s and 30s, it's not a big city. It's run by crime, vice, all the way through the mayor, politics, the police. Everything's on a payoff. So the city's incredibly open to the swing movement, the vice that came with that, with the prostitutes and the drugs and the music. So it becomes a real center of the jazz universe that's attracting all of the great territory bands from the plains and the Mississippi. All these areas, they're all going to Kansas City, creating this amazing moment in Kansas City history, which I think inflates in our minds how important or how big a city Kansas City was. And it's very much a frontier town. It's very much a city that doesn't sprawl yet. You know, St. Louis is much bigger even across the state. Kansas City on the Missouri River is got this incredible little downtown with all these skyscrapers that have gone up. And then you get into cow fields pretty quick in 1938. So he's a Kansas City guy, Frank West, multi-instrumentalist, a great flute player, one of the great flautists of all time, a fun word to say. And he's also got a great Lester Young-like tone on the tenor. He's a stalwart of Basie's bands in the 50s and the 60s, and one of the great emulators of Lester Young's style. And he serves in World War II, comes back, joins Billy Eckstine's group for a while. This is in the late 40s. He does a record with Coltrane called Wheelin' and Dealin'. Mal Waldron's also on that. It was kind of the Prestige All-Stars at that point. And Frank West is now one of the guys giving kind of leadership in that session, although there's not really a leadership to it. This is a great Savoy record, 12072. This is from their golden era of really great modern stuff. Frank Foster's on this, Benny Powell, Henry Coker, Kenny Burrell, Eddie Jones, and Kenny Clark. And with the exception of Burrell and Clark, that's all Basie stuff. All those guys are Basie guys. Great album cover. To me, this is actually one of the best Savoy album covers. Savoy, as I've said 1,000 times, has an awful art department, and this is great stuff. North, east, south, west. Great stuff. And beautiful blues-driven playing, as you can hear. A lot of stuff in this era will have kind of shared leadership, so not all the stuff's going to be here. This is Opus de Jazz for flutes, vibes, piano, bass, and drums. Frank West is kind of the leader on this at this point. Milt Jackson, Hank Jones, Eddie Jones, and Kenny Clark. That's great early Savoy, 12036. That's Opus the Jazz. Opus in Swing with Burrell, Eddie Jones, Kenny Clark, Freddie Green. Also great stuff, 12085. Jazz for Playboys. Kenny Burrell, Joe Newman, bassy. Freddie Green, bassy. Ed Thigpen, Gus Johnson, Eddie Jones, pretty much all bassy there. Another great record, number 12095. About 1959-60 there maybe. 59 probably. Trombones featuring Frank West on flutes, arrangement by Frank Foster. Ron L. Bright, Freddie Green, Kenny Clark, Eddie Jones, Jimmy Cleveland, Benny Powell, Henry Coker. Insane. And again, mostly bassy alumni here. Opus the Jazz. This is the Opus the Blues. With, again, largely with bassy guys. It was recorded, didn't come out till much later. And this is a Japanese issue of it. My friend Jean-Michel had talked about this record numerous times. I finally grabbed it on my last trip to Japan, as it were, via the post office. He goes to Prestige now, and yo-ho, Frank West, Poor You Little Me, 7266. And this is going to put him in that same time as that Willis Jackson stuff, although he's not really soul jazz. Southern Comfort's a great record, 7231. And then Frank West Steamin' with Kenny Burrell, 7278. These are great 7200 sequence Prestige records that are all worth finding. And Frank West, being a little under the radar, is one of those cats whose records you can get for a great deal. You can find these old Frank West records on Savoy for 20 bucks. The Prestige for 30, you know. People just don't know about them. Record store guys, a lot of times their knowledge of jazz is limited. Some guys are very jazzable, but there's some record store guys that are young, hip, and they know Coltrane, they know Monk, they barely know Parker. But when it comes to the deeper aspects of it, there's a lot of record store guys that don't know much about jazz on its bigger, broader scales. Now we're talking about James Moody, number 36. And Moody is outstanding. One of the most underappreciated guys in this music. He's part of the bebop movement. He spent some time in Europe. He plays hard driving, hard bop at times. He can swing with the best of them. He's firmly rooted in the blues. He's also sax and a flautist as well, like Frank West, like Yusef Lateef, like actually a lot of guys. Born March 26, 1925 in Savannah, Georgia. That's the deep south, for those who don't know. And Georgia, not a comfortable place for a brother to be. Much more so than Florida. It's a hit with a song called Mood for Love. And it ends up being something he plays off and on throughout his career. Leads him to his recording contract with Argo. His mom leaves his dad early. They end up moving to Newark. And Newark's kind of where Savoy is located. It's on the cusp of New York City on the New Jersey side, but it's still part of the New York City sphere of influence. He works with Don Byas while he's in Newark. And Don Byas, the guy we talked about, who's really underappreciated. 43, he joins the Army. 46, he comes back. He starts playing bebop with Dizzy Gillespie. And that's some great stuff if you can track that down. In 48, he does a Blue Note session. And Max Roach, Kenny Dorham, Blakey, you're part of that. He moves to Europe for 4 years. And he cites racism and the uncontrollable feeling he gets in America. That's why he leaves. He can't take it. The stress, the ugly. It's too much. And so he goes to Europe for 4 years, right in the middle of one of the most important eras in jazz's history. And so he's gone from 48 to 52. He comes back, he signs a label with Prestige, does a couple of great records there, and then he ends up moving to Argo, where he just has some most important Chicago style blues, gutsy stuff. Some forward modern stuff in there, some composition, but it's much more based in swinging hard. We'll go through his discography here. This is Hi-Fi Party, James Moody, 7011. It was probably recorded more like 53 when he first gets back from Europe. This is a great record. I'm gonna try to remember who's on this. Dave Burns on the trumpet, that's awesome. William Shepard on the trombone, Pee Wee Moore, Eddie Jefferson vocal. A couple names I don't know, Jimmy Boyd, John Latham on the bass. Great early Prestige. That's an old pressing of it. Nice record, tough to come by. This is his next one, James Moody's Moods, 7056. And I think this one might be recorded in 55. And then one of my favorite Prestige album covers is Whale, Moody Whale, 7036. And is this from one session? I think it is. A lot of the same guys are on this. So it was probably recorded in 54. What a great album cover though. You know, one of the best Prestige album covers, for sure. This is Moody, 7072. And that ends his contract with Prestige. And remember, some of that comes earlier than those releases. It's just being repackaged on LP there. Now we're going to go to Argo. And the guy has a long, fruitful history with Argo. This is on Emercy. And it's actually from a 10-inch that came out probably in 53. Great stuff. Moody's themes on here. Poor Butterfly, St. Louis Blues. Who's on this one with him? Doesn't say, but it does have the blueprint on the back indicating it's a very old pressing of that. I'm going to put on one of his Argo records here. This Emercy stuff is a little more old school feeling. Where he moves to Argo here, it's definitely a little bit more contemporary sounding. A few years have passed. And it's really hard to grasp how fast jazz was changing. You know, 52 to 56, a lot of stuff changed. The music's rapidly going through leaps and bounds of change. This is number 603, making it the third album Argo released. It's called Flute in the Blues, James Moody, Argo 603. It's got some great little tracks on it, Body and Soul's on this. I don't see the band listed, at least not on an easy way to see it. But this is a really solid record. You can hear the flute going on there. And then he has a long string of stuff here at Argo. Here's Moody's Mood for Love, which was that big hit. It might be a redoing of it there. Last Train from Overbrook, James Moody, Argo 637. 648. James Moody, just self-titled. Beautiful little pressing of that. And so he's a lot of records that come up pretty quick here in the 600 series. Hey, it's James Moody. And Argo starts at 601, remember? And so there's 679, and this is probably our 6th or 7th Argo Moody record already. Another Bag, 695. Great Day, James Moody, 725. James Moody Coming on Strong, 740. And then James Moody Cooking the Blues, recorded at the Jazz Workshop, 756. So there's a long string of Argo LPs that he does that are really solid. And like I said, he's one of the guys that really kind of slips through the cracks. I'm thinking his time in Europe probably didn't do him a lot of favors in terms of his popularity here stateside, which is unfortunate. You know, Moody has some great stuff, and he's on great labels. That should tell you a lot. And like I've always said, you don't get to make records and music in the 40s and 50s and even into the 60s until the psychedelic thing happens without being a great musician. They don't even waste tape on you if you can't play. So white cats, black cats, it don't matter. If you in there recording in this era, you've got a skill set. And it's important to remember that, because I think sometimes people think like, oh, some of these guys were better than others, and some of these guys are just great players, and some of them are good. No, there's no such thing as a bad player, white or black, recording jazz music. These guys are all great players. What differentiates them is what's driving them. Ego, money, the blues, struggle, sex, where are they coming from? And that's going to inform you a lot about where they're going to end up going and what they're going to be telling you. And I think it's weird hearing people talk about people's skills and how this guy's one of the best players, and how do you quantify that? Where's the list of guys that couldn't play? So it's almost redundant to say great player, because it's pretty much the case. This is back in the day when musicians were musicians and actually played. You didn't just push go on a sampler and say, I'm a musician. I made a song on my cell phone. It's great. It's 4 bars long, and it goes on for 7 minutes. And they call that music nowadays. Kids today don't know nothing about music. They don't know what melody is. They don't know how melody changes keys and moves forward and creates memorable hooks that stick in you. Because they just hear a loop, a static loop. It's one of the saddest things to me is the state of music today. How they took music out of school, and now music sucks. September 23, born in Chicago, the great Clifford Jordan. Clifford's a really well-respected guy. He's got a fairly big following with today's jazz consumer, in part because he was on Blue Note, and Blue Note elevates anybody's career at this point. Blue Note is such a luminary in today's collector's mindset that anybody who made it on that label, their name is going to be in people's mouths more than no matter what other labels you were on. It's probably more important to be on Blue Note than on Columbia, even for today's consumer. You just discover all these artists that a lot of them should be more obscure than they are in a way, but because Blue Note has that name on there, people find that discography and dig through it. Clifford plays with Max in Chicago, a great tenor player. He plays with Sonny Stitt. He's playing with some R&B groups back in the Chi-Town. He ends up going to New York in 1957, which, like I said, they all do. He makes 3 LPs for Blue Note. Clifford Jordan, John Gilmore, Blowing In. John Gilmore ends up playing, I believe, with Sun Ra for quite a long time. And Gilmore ends up making some pretty out stuff. He's worth mentioning. I don't have any of his stuff as a leader. I don't think he has a lot of stuff as a leader at this point. He's more of a sideman. But they come in from Chicago together and make their statement here at Blue Note in 1958. And he also plays with Horace Silver, J.J. Johnson, Kenny Dorham. He's a part of the Mingus Sextet in 1964 that's touring Europe with Eric Dolphy. He tours Africa with the great Randy Weston, the great piano player from Riverside. He ends up in Paris and Belgium, playing over there for quite a long time. He comes back and records on a Prestige record with John Jenkins and Bobby Timmons, which I'll show you in a second. And he makes some stuff for Riverside that are great records. And then he ends up at Strata East and Steeplechase recording in Europe for the remainder of his career. These Blue Notes are all fairly legendary. Lee Morgan, Curtis Fuller, John Jenkins, Ray Bryant, Paul Chambers, Mark Taylor. Solid band on that. Cliff Craft, 1582. Blue Note in the 1570 through 95. It's pretty insane. Sonny Clark's on this. Art Farmer's on this. It's pretty insane the streak of records Blue Note does in the late 1500s. This is some of the Jazzland Riverside stuff. Clifford Jordan's Starting Time. Clifford Jordan, A Story Tale with Sonny Red, who we talked about just a little bit ago. Clifford Jordan Bearcat Quartet. Cedar Walton, Teddy Smith, and J.C. Moses. Spellbound Clifford Jordan Quartet. Cedar Walton, Spanky DeBrest, Albert Heath. Al Tootie's on that. Tootie. Jordan, Jenkins, and Timmons. This is that Prestige New Jazz record. Jenkins and Jordan do like 3 or 4 records together. And then this is something he does at Atlantic. Comes out a little bit later, probably 63, 64. These are my roots. Clifford Jordan plays lead belly. So he's playing the blues essentially. And that's a great record. Kind of tough to come by at this point. Jazz in general is getting tougher and tougher to find here in the wild. Gotta keep moving this episode along. It's getting long here, but that's gonna happen with these last few. Paul Gonzalez, born 1920, July 12th, and most people are gonna know Paul Gonzalez from his time with Ellington, the great Newport concert of '56, where he sets the crowd on fire, doing 27 choruses of diminuendo and crescendo and blues. Ellington's career had kind of slipped into a downturn, and he's playing at Newport. The crowd's kind of all in their chairs. A few people are clapping their hands, but the place ain't boogieing down. And Duke ain't feeling that. Duke couldn't have that. Duke knows how to make old people get up and dance. And so he didn't like that disconnect. His records weren't selling what they used to. Change was all over jazz at this point. And Gonzalez likes to walk around the crowd when he plays. And Duke used to nickname him the strolling violins. He would walk around and play in the crowd. And he gets up and starts playing diminuendo and crescendo. And the crowd starts responding. People start dancing in the aisles. Ellington keeps nodding him to continue. The band keeps pushing and pushing. And he ends up playing the chorus, 27 times. And it just builds and builds and builds like this incredible tsunami of sound that Ellington, his smile grew and grew as the band starts to just get into it and the crowd's going nuts, and it reignites Ellington's career. And he actually says he was born in Newport, which is ridiculous because he has half the jazz canon is written by him going back to the mid-20s. But Ellington's such a great story that I love so much. Him and Armstrong both make my heart kind of warm speaking about them. They're such ambassadors for this music, for their race, for their community. They're just noble men. And like the Knights of King Arthur's Table, Ellington and Armstrong have a chair. Make way for the Duke and make room for Pops. You know, I mean, that's just how that's going to be. His parents were from Cape Verde Islands in the Atlantic, off the coast of Africa, and they immigrated to America. He picks up guitar first and learns how to play Cape Verdean folk songs for his family. Ends up picking up the saxophone, and is one of the great blues storytellers of all time. He plays with Dizzy 49 to 50. He plays with Basie from 47 to 49. He joins Duke, I think, in 1950. Sadly, he dies in London in 1974 of alcohol and drugs. And Duke dies a few days later. And Duke's family wouldn't tell him that Paul had died because they were so close. But they still died only days apart. He has a couple records on RCA that I've actually never seen in the late 50s. His discography is small, sadly. He makes this great record at Argo, 626. Tough record to find, never been reissued, goes for hundreds of bucks. It's a tough LP to track down. Getting together, Paul Gonzalez on Jazzland, probably 1962, 63. Great record with Wynton Kelly, Jimmy Cobb, Nat Adderley, Sam Jones. And just great stuff. This is Cleopatra feeling jazzy on Impulse, A41, and A55 is held the way it is. So Impulse gives them 2 sessions. And I have never seen the gatefold version of this. Every Impulse I have is gatefold. I could not find me a gatefold one of this anywhere. I'm guessing it must have a gatefold version, but I don't know. I've never been able to see one. It's something I keep looking for once in a while, even though I have it. It's like, okay, if I can find a gatefold, I'd like to have it, because all my Impulses are gatefolds, but I've never come across it. This record, though, if you get a chance to find this, under $100, you need to grab it. It's gorgeous, as you can just hear. It's beautiful music to my ears. Another real important cat, and like I said, we're getting into the realm of these cats are all going to be pretty important now, is the great Gigi Grace. And Gigi is kind of a quiet fella, private, raised in a very religious Methodist family, so he's got pretty conservative values. Born on November 28, 1925 in Pensacola, Florida, and so that's not quite the same as Miami. He lived through a depression. His parents had a tough time. Like I said, they were very much involved in the church. They move eventually to Northeast somewhere. He ends up at Boston Conservatory and learns a lot about music theory and becomes quite knowledgeable about writing, arranging, composing. Right as jazz is going through this wonderful lotusing of all this new stuff happening in jazz, Grace is kind of at the center of it. He's influenced by Charlie Parker. He's influenced by Thelonious Monk. What's new there? 52, he graduates, ends up playing with Lionel Hampton. There's a weird little... Who knew that Lionel Hampton had guys playing with him? How many guys on this list has Lionel Hampton allowed them to gain fame with him? It's incredible. He records on the side with Clifford Brown, while he's with Lionel Hampton's group in Europe. Clifford Brown in Paris, that's with Gigi Grace. In 53, he goes to New York. He ends up playing on a Blakey session on Emersy. And that's a great record, a little 10-inch, which I meant to pull out. That's a really solid Blakey session. I've always really liked that 10-inch. He plays with Art Farmer and Gigi Grace early on Prestige. That's a great record. He plays with Teddy Charles, Oscar Pettiford. In 57, he creates the Jazz Lab with the great Donald Byrd. And Donald Byrd and him make 4 or 5 records together known as the Jazz Lab. This one's on Jubilee. That's what we're listening to. Great modern driving and interesting stuff. This is also in 57, Columbia 998. And I'm pretty sure the door opens for him to record this at Columbia because Blakey had just recorded those 2 records with the Jazz Masters at Columbia, and Byrd was a member. And so he gets a couple albums for him and Gigi to record. This is also in Columbia. I think Jackie Paris makes a showing on this one. It's a tough record to come by. This is a Jazzland reissue of this record. Another great Jazz Lab record. Great band on this. Art Taylor, Wendell Marshall, Wade Legg, and of course Byrd and Grace. So Jazzland, the first 15 or so Jazzland records are reissues of earlier Riverside material, just so you know that. This is Nika's Tempo on Savoy, and it has some earlier recording sessions called in the 1LP, number 12137, and he's already having success now on Columbia, on Prestige New Jazz. So Savoy digs out some of their old vault tapes of him playing with Silver, Monk, Blakey, Cecil Payne, Oscar Pettiford, Kenny Clark, and they issued this LP probably 1958 or 59, but it's earlier works. And then these 3 records he does on New Jazz are 3 of the toughest records to come by in jazz. And I had to go to Japan for 2 of them. They're just not out there. Collectors do not sell their Gigi Grace records. I'm guessing they probably didn't sell too well. And I don't know if there was tougher Prestige material to find than these 3 Gigi Grace. And the Japanese realize how tough these records are to find. And so even the Japanese reissues will push up to $80, $100 because the demand is such that if they list a Gigi Grace record, it'll sell. Someone will buy it for $80 for a 30-year-old Japanese pressing, because the American ones are that tough to come by, and enough people are digging on Gigi. Moving on, he does compose some important stuff. He composed Nika's Tune. He composes Minority. He also composes Social Call. And those are pretty famous tracks. And then he kind of disappears, Gigi. You know, he gets into being an electrical engineer, if I recall. I think I wrote it down somewhere. But he leaves music behind and kind of fades into history, which is rather sad. But certainly not the worst ending for a jazz cat. Now we're going to talk about Paul Kennishing, Vice Pres. And one of the most unique things about Paul Kennishing is he hails from Denver. And I don't think I've come across another Denver jazz player. And of course, he doesn't stay there. It's just where he was born, went to school. What type of jazz scene exists in Denver in the 50s? Probably not much of one. This is a Dawn record from 1109, probably 1955, 56. Great stuff, great cover. Actually has a map of the Denver area in the background there. Denver's a small town in the 1950s. It's not the metropolis that it is today. Paul Kennishing was born May 17, 1916. Goes way back. His nickname was Vice Pres because he plays so much like Lester Young. And he actually does work with Lester. I think he was even taught by Lester at one point. Lester called him Lady Q, and Lester called all the brothers Lady something. Lady Q was Paul Kennishing. He plays with Jay McShann, the great swing band from 42, 43, kind of a Kansas City Midwest swing band. Plays with Johnny Otis out in the West Coast from 45 to 47. In New York City, he ends up going there in 47 with Louis Jordan. And in New York, he has kind of a breakthrough. He records with Basie in 51. He goes to Emerson and he records what's originally a 10-inch. And I have the 10-inch, but I didn't pull it for some unknown reason. But it's pretty much the same cover as the 12-inch. I think the 12-inch might have had a couple tracks. But there's a 10-inch version of this as well, 36027. The other one's like 260 something. But this is great early Kennishing from probably 53, 54 on the Emerson label. While he's at Emerson, he's recording with Dinah Washington. He also does some stuff with Benny Goodman at the time, and the guy by the name of Nat Pierce, a West Coast pianist. He works with Coltrane and Kennishing. It's a great session. Billie Holiday. In the 60s, he works with the Heath brothers. He makes a great record at Bethlehem called The Chases On with Charlie Rouse, which I believe is in my Charlie Rouse section. He signs with Prestige. He makes a couple of really great records there, including the Coltrane record, which is in my Coltrane records. On the Sunny Side, great stuff. This is on United Artists. Paul Kennishing, PQ. Also on United Artists, like who? Paul Kennishing, Harry Edison, Nat Pierce, Joe Jones, Snooky Young, Chad Collins, Al Gray, Freddie Green, Eddie Jones. That's all Basie guys. They're doing a Basie tribute. But Kennishing often does that. And he played with Basie, like I said, for a while there. And so Basie just has an impact on people. This is another early Emerson record, Moods. Paul Kennishing, probably from the early 50s, put on LP here. This is a Decca Studio One recording, and it's got numerous different musicians on it. Benny Green, Frank Foster, Joe Newman, Edward Jones, Kenny Clark. So it looks like it's all Basie guys again. And then he does these two records for Prestige in 58, 59, maybe even 60, for Basie and Basie Reunion. And again, it's all the Basie guys working together, doing tributes to Basie's songs, and having fun playing the blues together. Because that's what Basie was about, was a good time and the blues. And Kennishing embodies that. And one of the things you really notice is how much the guys love Bill Basie. You know, the guys who played with William, the Count, all hold him in the highest regards, and you feel a tangible love emulating from these cats. So now we're going to do number 31, and this is one of the great tenor players. He's also a Texas tenorman. His records have become very expensive. He's got a couple LPs called the Trance and Heavy, which I haven't even been able to get yet. They're all so darn expensive, and I'm not that guy. But he's a Texas tenorman. He's a little bit more modern than most of the Texas tenormen. You know, he's got a lot of Coltrane in him, but he's not out like Coltrane. He's just big, full of life, boisterous like Coltrane. Born October 3rd, 1930. He's got this kind of tough, edgy sound. It's just sounds like it might whoop your ass, you know? But it's strong in the blues. It's strong in the gospel, which roots him firmly in that whole Texas tenorman tradition. He's known mostly for his time with Mingus. He plays with Mingus from 58 to 60, which means all those great Mingus records, Blues and Roots, Oh Yeah, the two Columbia records, all of the Clown. He's on all those great Mingus albums. The stuff on Candid. He's a great fit with Mingus because he centers Mingus. I think a lot of times the guys who are kind of more out need some guy more in to balance. You know, that whole yin-yang thing, it's important. Like I said, that string of Mingus records from 58 to 60, 61, it's the highlight of Mingus's career for the most part. He's even on that first Impulse, Mingus, 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 which I had to pause and breathe in the middle of. Saying Mingus, Mingus, Mingus takes your breath away. It's weird. It happened again. Mingus, Mingus, Mingus. Like, it's hard to breathe when you're saying that phrasing. Shuts your throat off or something. He plays with Don Patterson, the organ player, quite a lot. And that tells you how centered and gravy Booker is. You know, when you're playing with organ guys, you're playing kind of soul, blues, jazz. But he also makes this great string of records at Prestige called the Book Series. That's high-level octane. He plays with Horace Parlan on some of his records on Blue Note from 61 to 63. And he does end up at Blue Note late in his career. But his early stuff, here he is on Candid, which of course he's recording with Mingus at Candid. Here he does a session at Savoy very early on in his career, 12-1-5-4. Makes it about 1960 probably. This record at Bethlehem is really great, the book. And they would often say, "Book, cook," when he was playing. Like, turn up the heat on the beans, cook. And there's a pretty common word in the black community. Just, you know, dig, cook, play. And so the Book became his nickname. And you'd also say, people can't say book, cook. So he uses that book thing a lot in his album titles. What we're listening to here, where did I put it? I don't know. Maybe it's in here. This is Booker Ervin, the songbook, 7318. So these are pretty late on the Prestige discography. Exaltation, 7293. The Booker Ervin Freedom Book, Songbook, Freedom Book, the Blues Book is what we're listening to, 7340. Carmel Jones is on this, Richard Davis, Alan Dawson, and Gilda Mahomes. Really outstanding record. And these are expensive records. This is Booker Ervin Groovin' High, 7417. Again with the great Carmel Jones on trumpet, Jackie Byard, Richard Davis, who both played with Mingus. Then he goes to Blue Note, Booker Ervin, The In-Between. That's a great record. Like I said, there's two Prestige that I should have. The Trance and Heavy. And I'm not being able to find either of them. Booker Ervin, The Space Book on Prestige again, 7386. And then this is Back from the Gig, which features some great Blue Note sessions that were called on a double LP a little later on. This is really good stuff, really strong listen. Really enjoy that stuff. And what's sad about these cookbook records, all the book records, is that the first issues are tough to find in the Blue Trident. Pretty invisible out there. But even second pressings of Booker Ervin records on the god-awful Green label can fetch $60, $80, $100. And I'm hesitant to spend $80 on an original pressing of something, and I'll settle for a very good, just so I have it. I don't care if the cover's a little dinged or, you know, there's some surface abrasions that you can't hear. I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? And I'll pay $60, $80. But when you want $60, $80 for a second pressing of the green label with the flimsy vinyl, that's tough for me, man. That's tough for me. So anyway, it's been a long episode, over an hour here. I'm going to cut it off. We're down to 31. We got 30 guys to go. These were all fairly big names and all-stars in my mind. And I see these guys as all being luminaries of the saxophone, and there's nobody who shouldn't have these artists in their collection. They're all important parts of the jazz engine. And jazz itself has an engine, and it was one of redemption for people. And it's great American history. It's so important, guys. It's not just about virtuosity. It's not just about looking posh and feeling sophisticated because you're playing jazz for people. This music's about redemption and getting through ugly times. And that's what makes it important. That's what makes it history. Have a great day. Peace.